This is an oldie, but a goodie. Here's a remastered version of this coloring of a silver teapot. Enjoy the show. I looked at dozens of teapots that more or less fit my vision of what I want to draw for you guys. Let's take a look at my top 3 choices. What do these have in common? What sells the illusion of silver here? They all have the general shape that I'm looking for. Shape is important because it will determine the placement of light, shadow, and glare. These all have a white rounded body, a thinner neck, and a lid. These 3 elements make up the general shape of my silver object. Additionally, they each have a handle, a spout, and a base. These are secondary elements. There are 3 major elements of light and shadow that are at work here. First is this big white area here. This is actually a reflection of the surface that the teapot is placed on. All of these examples are displayed on white tables or counters. If you placed your silver teapot on a checkered tablecloth, this area would be reflecting a checkered pattern instead. And this right here is the edge of the table. See how it curves around the bulging body of the teapot? Very important not to make it a straight line. Notice that the tabletop is also reflected here, here, and up here. The second significant visual element is the dark areas. These are the reflections of the empty space of the room beyond the edge of the table and behind the viewer. Some secondary dark areas will happen here as well. The third important element is the glare. These are the whitest parts of the subject, and they represent the actual light reflected on the silver surface. They are the shine or the sparkle that you see on polished silver. In this example, the glare spots indicate that the light is shining from above and at an angle. But there's also a secondary light source here that's vertical and not quite as pronounced. For my drawing, I will also place my silver teapot on a white surface, which I will indicate with this lighter area and these reflections here. I will also have the dark depth of the room reflection in the main part of the body and the lid, as well as on the secondary elements. And I will have my glare. For the sake of elegance and demonstration, I will not introduce multiple light sources. Well, that's not entirely true. I will have 2 ceiling lamps that are right next to each other, but because they are located so close to each other, they can be considered one light source. I just think that having 2 sparkles will look prettier. I'm working on gray-toned paper. It's perfect for silver and other gray metals because the mid-tone is already there. And for my tools, I'm using white charcoal pencils, hard and medium, and a single cool gray color pencil. I highly recommend that you start with white. There are multiple reasons for this choice. First, white charcoal performs best when applied directly to clean paper, not over other layers of color. If you don't establish your lightest parts now, you may not be able to do so later on. Not without switching to a different medium like acrylic paint anyway. Second, I find that establishing light based on where the light source is easier than trying to guess where the shadows might be. And third, if you start with black, you run the risk of smudging it or having it powder over the areas that you plan to have white. And if those areas get even slightly contaminated with pigment, a truly white effect may be impossible to achieve. So I begin my coloring with all the areas that I know will be white. And those are the reflection of the tablecloth and the light glare. I apply more white pigment to the areas that I want to look brighter, and I gently blend the other areas with a Q-tip for soft gradient effect. These 2 starbursts here are secondary reflections to my main 2 lights. See how they're placed directly under the main 2 glare spots? Maybe they wouldn't actually be there in real life, but they look really cool. And that's another thing about coloring metals and other shiny surfaces that's pretty neat. There's no way to exactly measure if it's 100% accurate. Every single reflective object will look completely different, even with the slightest change in lighting and placement. The important thing is to make it believable. If you're enjoying this video and this effect and would like to learn metal effects in depth, join my 21-lesson Udemy course specifically on metals. In it, I teach 3 types of metals: silver, gold, and copper. And we practice them on various subjects like spoons, pillboxes, teapots, golden cats, etc. Of course, I provide a bunch of practice coloring pages to my students. I structure my lessons in a way that guides you from very basic effects to very complex, with assignments and challenges along the way. Here's the link. Go check it out, watch the intro video for more details, and I hope I'll see you in class. After all the white elements are established, I like to move on to the darkest part. This will establish the level of contrast in this drawing. I want really high contrast because that will convey a super shiny surface. I'm working with hard charcoal here, and I'm using a Q-tip for blending. Remember, these were the areas highlighted in purple in our graphic earlier. When I feel that I added enough dark areas, I go over them with a medium charcoal pencil. It's darker. And now I switch to my color pencil. A common coloring mistake when it comes to silver effects is doing the whole thing in black and white only. But silver isn't 100% grayscale. It has a slightly bluish tint to it, not to mention that it reflects some of the environment around it. It's never just black and white. For my one color, I chose a 30% cool gray from the Prismacolor set. Prismacolors have a beautiful and wide variety of grays that all have a bit of pigment to them. This one is slightly blue. I love this brand because the colors lay so nicely over other pigments. If I made certain charcoal areas too dark, for instance, I can easily correct that with my Prismacolor pencil. I also love using them for blending. See the nice metallic gradient that I'm starting to achieve here? It's important to say that this is what works best for me. You don't need to buy the entire 150 Prismacolor pencil set to be able to color this page. The same effect can be achieved with other brands and other colors. If you don't have the 30% cool gray specifically, see what you do have. You probably have a pale blue somewhere in your collection, or at least a light blue. Maybe you can use 2 or more colors to achieve a similar shade of gray. It's all very personal. You also don't need to necessarily use charcoal. Using gray and black pencils will work just as well. And as far as white charcoal goes, it's a bit of an addiction of mine, but you can also just use the white of the paper if you choose so. There's more than one way to skin a cat, or draw a teapot. Now I digress in my coloring and switch to the background. Why? For some reason, at this particular stage in my drawing, I felt the need to know what my background will be. I decided on gold leaf. I love using gold leaf to make the background look flat because by contrast, it makes my 3D coloring effect stand out more. On something like this, there's nothing wrong with doing the background last, or starting with the background, or not doing the background at all. If you were coloring an entire scene though, like a complete illustration of objects on the table with the rest of the room visible, I would recommend that you color the rest of the room first and leave the shiny silver objects for last when you already have all the light and color established. Moving on, you know I love props. Props make compositions more interesting, and for demonstration pages, they introduce opportunities to practice other skills, like the cherry in the lips coloring that allowed us to play with 3D effects and color comparisons. The rose is here to establish a flat table surface, so that the teapot is not just floating in space, and also give us a real colorful object to reflect in the silver. I will make my rose a tea rose, since we're already on the topic of tea and teapots. Plus, tea roses are my favorites. To know where to place the rose reflections, you first need to understand where the rose itself is placed in relation to the teapot. I would say that it's directly underneath the body, slightly closer to us, but not by much. I think that the part of the teapot that would show the rose reflection would be mostly on the side here. Therefore, we won't really see a clear reflection, but rather very smudged, elongated patches of color right about here. Make sure to use the same exact colors in the reflection as you used on the object itself. I made my tea rose color by combining pink and light orange, so I'm using the same 2 pencils in the silver surface. Same goes for the leaf. I think just a tiny bit of its reflection will be visible right about here. But there's another part of the teapot that will catch some rose reflections, and that's the base. Most of the base is already in shadow, so the rose color won't be as clearly defined here, but it is still important to include it. Now this last part is subtle and fast, but it's probably the most important effect. I look over my drawing and see if the illusion works. I don't think it does yet. I feel that at this point my contrast may be too high, and that edge between the white and the black is too stark. There's something missing. What's missing is that surface scratch effect. You know how silver always has those nice thin surface polish lines? I will simulate that effect by going over the whole thing with my light blue pencil, or light gray technically, blending the seams where white meets black and actually shading over the really dark parts. Why not just use a lighter gray for that shadow parts to begin with, you may ask? Somehow, having a dark layer that you will cover with a lighter one gives the subject more depth. Now it really looks like a silvery surface that happens to have something dark reflected in it. Layers go a long way. Don't sweat finding the perfect shade for every single part of your coloring. Instead, learn to balance and adjust your gradients and colors with layers. So, what did you think? Want to give it a shot? This page is available as a free download in my private community, Talm. Talm is free to join and it's freaking awesome. Just ask to join and myself or one of my hosts will let you in. Grab your page and give it a shot. And remember, you can also take the full 21 lesson course on Udemy. Here's that link again. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. It helps me out a lot. And share the video with your friends. Thank you for watching. Bye.